Okay, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 Procedures. Sound of the hazard material management practices must be incorporated in the Army doctrine operations and training as required for the AR 710 Army installations established the centralized HEM hazardous material management and form the hazardous material management program. Centralized management is focused on and driven by the environmental impacts, the cost efficiency, mission performance efficiencies, supply chain integration, substantial consideration, safety of personnel. If the role of each level of the command is to ensure the Department of the Army hazardous material management policy procedures implemented, the metrics are established to measure the progress of the hazardous material management goals. Army, the Hmmp integrates in management selected a set of the traditional focus and installation, environmental contracting, logistics, safety, industrial hygiene, offices, fundamental premises of Army hazardous material management, minimizes track control, ordering, storage, distribution of hazardous material, effective pre-authorization, single point control. It is also facilities tracking the hazardous waste for generation to final disposal, essential to the program that is required to track the hazardous material, the constant to the level, and the use of automated tools to facilitating the tracking and the reporting. Meaningful performance indicators established by the Headquarters Department of Army may be supplemental and subordinate. They measure, verify the reproducible link to the hazardous material management and business practices, consistent with the EO's reports prepared by the installation level and extracted forth from the enterprise automation planning for the based on the purchase published guidance. 2.2 Scaling the installation program. Army commands the responsibility information established. Army commands responsibilities for installations which establish the hazard material management implementation guidance. The intent is to create the hazard material management program and reflect the good business and sense of the report of the installation mission and important aspects of how to the best implementation of the hazard material management program, how to scale the hazard material management program to match the installation mission and the number of the hazard material transactions with the hazardous material management program operational tempo. Scaling can be based to be any one of the combination of the following factors: the size of the mission of any of the installation, the number of the type of the hazardous material, the quantity of the hazardous transaction, the number of the chemicals meeting the report, the threshold for the environmental compliance reporting, the number of the technical environmental permits required to maintain the operation, geographical location of the separation of the supporting installations, past environmental compliance recorded, and status, personal exposure, injury records, overall risks of the mission and personnel or environment. For example, installation with industrial operation using the high quantities hazardous waste will require a more detailed dynamic program than the headquarters garrison, no larger than maintenance operation that has not met a chemical reporting threshold in the past 10 years. Forward station organizations are subject to the requirements of the appropriate final government standards because of the reporting requirements may not be as extensive overseas. Data collection business practices should be adopted by the OCONUS hazard material management programs to fit their specific sets of circumstances consistent with the overall goals of the program. See, the degree of the implementation may also be affected by the availability of evolving capability of enterprise and resourcing application. Further guidance to the assist commander's implementation of the hazard material management program business practices is discussed in paragraph below. 2.3 Business practices. It is the DA policy to establish standardization and centralized hazard management and hazardous waste business practices to reduce and prevention, pollution control, reducing adequate acquisitions, using, handling, disposition of hazardous material, and the generation of hazardous waste. The Army Hazard Material Management provides the commander with the structure of the business practice to implement the centralized hazard management. The fundamental hazard material management. The fundamental purpose of the Army hazard material management program is to minimize control tracking the hazard material at the constitutional level throughout its life cycle on an institution using a single control point. The following paragraphs provide business practices implemented by the facility achieving Army hazard material programs, goals, and objectives. The following any of the practices are considered standard of the HMMPS hazard material management programs at the Army installations. 2.4 Business practices and implementation guidance. Establish centralized management and visibility of the hazardous material throughout the life cycle on the installation. Centralized hazardous management includes policy guidance and day-to-day operations. The Headquarters Department of the Army publishes overall hazard management policy guidance for implementation Army-wide. The U.S. Army Material Command of the U.S. Army Installation Management Command, IMCOM, Installation Management Command, other direct reporting units, the Army National Guard Bureau, the forward station of the Army Services Component Commands develop the supplementary guidance for the compliance with the subordinate tenant commandments, units, and activities. 3. The installation commander establishes a local hazard material management policy to procedure with guidance at a centralized hazard material control point and conducts the day-to-day operations. Units activities facility publishes standard authorization procedures consistent with the installation of the higher headquarters policy and guidance. Creates a hazardous material committee commits and established to assist the commanders in developing and maintaining centralized hazard material management material policy guidance business practices, providing the program oversight. The committee is responsible for identifying the resources required to implementation successful hazard material management program, developing evaluation criteria to measure the success of the local program. Unresolved issues are forwarded to the installation commander or the designee in lieu of the Hazard Material Management Program Committee. The commanders may be used to any existing environmental quality control committee to assist with the oversight of the Hazard Material Management Program. Size membership will vary from the size of the mission. Installation membership is determined by the commander, may be adjusted with the local requirements. Minimum committee. The membership normally includes the following: a director of logistics, DOL, environmental office, safety office, industrial hygiene office, department of director of public work office, director of public works, that has the material control plan program, and tenants units activity participating in installation hazard material management program. Establish local authorized use and user lists to identify the approved process control hazard material used in the process. 1. The description is an authorized description. Authorized user lists are normally established in the installation of the facility level and comprise two components: authorized processes and authorized hazardous material. An authorized list is used to control acquisition and identify the types of the hazardous material usage estimates, hazardous material, hazardous waste generation, and to support the environmental reporting that prescribed to the government agency as pollution prevention tool. The Army goal is to validate automatically each of the hazardous material transaction against established authorized prior to the procurement issues, and unauthorized requests should result in to review the decision process before proceeding. Installation should ensure that the hazardous material identified by the technical manuals, equipment, documentation required for the basic loads are included in the authorized user list. Each distinct operation, such as painting or using recirculating solvent part washers or conducting research protocols to the HMMP hazard material management process. The process may be actively specifically by or generally no location specific. These uses of the authorized use of facility. 1. The visible specific chemicals installation within a region. The ability to restrict the use of specified chemicals, installation pollution prevention, opportunity assessment, identification of hazard material used in the support of specific weapon systems for program manager lifecycle management, and identification of waste streams generated by the weapon systems, the program manager lifecycle planning, identification of the training requirements, identification potential exposure information, possible hazard material waste substitution, logistic, environmental safety, industrial hygiene offices, working with the HMMP, the Hazard Material Management Committee, review and approve the process hazard management approved for the use in other processes. Key source of the mission processes. Material used in the process are the equipment technical manuals and lubrication orders. 2. Authorized hazardous materials. The hazardous material is approved with the tracked chemical constitution level as provided by the manufacturer's material safety data sheets. Other supplementary sources is linked to the process that authorizes the use of the material. Installations track those products containing the chemicals listed in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Act list of lists, the 29 Code Federal Regulations 1910, equivalent overseas regulatory organization as agreed to the applicable final government standards. When reviewing the hazardous material management committees and concentrate on quality, toxicity, exposure, or potential of materials. Hazardous material is approved and ordered issues tracked by the unit of use. Inventory requisition objectives. Reorder the points and establish the tracked using just in time the requisition of the extent possible. The support the material substitution regulatory reporting process reviews hazard material management program per metric reporting pollution prevention opportunity assessment risk reduction reduce risk deduction to the personnel. The initial authorization user listing will normally be created by conducting a formal inventory identification review and approval of all hazardous material on the installation during a hazardous material management implementation. The HMP committees identify required materials and compare them to the chemical label list and manufacturer safety data sheets to determine which would be approved for the technical manual, and lab protocols determine the material needed for mission performance. Other considerations are products containing chemicals likely to reach reporting thresholds or having specific safety concerns, toxicity, exposure potential, and chemicals affecting environmental petroleums will be tracked. All activities possessing using hazardous material will ensure the manufacturer's safety data sheets is readily available, and list of approved hazardous materials are maintained electronically. Authorized process identify how a material is used, potential exposure risk, what is the waste stream to the expect of the categorization, and describing processes that use the hazardous material. Generation of the hazardous waste is the key element of the strong pollution prevention program. Supports compliance report and informs of the basis and process improvement. Reviews of the process should be included the identification of hazardous materials, chemicals listed in Part 1910, Title 29 Code Federal Regulations. Environmental and industrial hygiene safety officers work jointly to determine the documentation of local process installation review and update processes at least every 5 years. The process can be detailed and generic. The detailed process facilitates more accurate emissions estimations and reporting. Less detailed processes are easier to establish and track, but provide less information for compliance reporting, pollution prevention, opportunity assessment. An example of the very detailed process is spray painting is a specific both using specific type of air filtration system or a specific spray gun. Examples of more manageable detailed process are high volume, low pressure spray painting, rollers, brush painting. An example of a generic process is painting. The recommended method of establishing process is described with the processing actually occurring. The examples of the process are spray painting, aerosol paint, spraying, brush and roller painting. The level of the detailed facilities creating the more accurate algorithms and capture releasing information for the pollution prevention opportunities assessment. If all the facilities, more identification of the potential chemical exposure. As minimum process will be defined by the using of the shops with the hazardous material linked to the shop. For example, the Department of Public Works would be the paint shop for the generation of the process includes the various methods of the painting: spray brush, roller, aerosol. All paints and materials used by the Department of the Works paint shop, regardless to the application method and amount of the release, are linked to the single process of the paint shop. The method is easily used to the significant levels of the hazardous material data for the environmental reporting tax release inventory air emissions. The pollution prevention opportunity assessment. Installation should establish the choose of proper process description providing sufficient details to support the compliance with reporting requirements of periodic pollution prevention opportunity assessments. Installation should also attempt the hazardous waste generation to end the item maintenance. More detailed process of the characterization be established when one of the hazardous material used contains a chemical likely to meet the exceed of the threshold planning quantity, the TPQ, the threshold planning quantity. Record any authorized use or user and or users list. Each command installation unit facility records in the AAU listing decision following the minimum information recorded to maintain the track the day-to-day transactions for 42 U.S. Standard Code Chapter 116 compliance reporting. Overseas hazardous material management practices will track the data, the elements necessary to comply with the final guidance, final government standards, and management reporting requirements. A material. This includes the stock number nomenclature unit, measure the unit of the issue, the unit of the type of the containing the kit, and the individual item applicable and the alternative units to the chemical abstract services information for each of the chemicals. They include the chemical abstract services number, chemical name, alternative names, hazard category, health category, hazard types, class of the physical states, identity, source of the reduction, methods, regulatory list has the list chemical is on, occupational safety, health and administration list limits. American Council of Government Industrial Hygienists threshold limits, the EPA and the threshold planning quantity, occupational safety hazard administration of the threshold planning quantity, site of the threshold planning quality, Other hazardous volatile organic compound, extremely hazardous substance, hazardous air pollutant, ozone depleting substances. Safety data sheets. The safety data sheets is documented produced to the manufacturer distributor of the hazardous material. It must accompany the sale of the product and intended to provide the key elements of the information pertaining to the use of the handling of the material, typical information, identification, material hazard properties appropriate for the safety measures, composition, and or ingredients. Master records. A master record establishes a unique combination of the stock numbers, the part number, the satisfaction, the safety data sheets. The facility tracking the chemical inventory on the installation minimum information includes the safety data sheets number, applicable number, national stock number, part number, universal product code, approval status, authorization limits, work center person, and zone. Process. This includes the name of the process, identification code, technical reference, location, building, floor, room, responsibility of point of the contact, information, material approved for the use of the process, generated waste streams, reported personnel, protective equipment, and required process equipment and filterization equipment you required at the training of the weapon and the system that processes will be used on or data processed / reviewed. Establish the center of the hazardous material control program. This is central procure and receive, issue, distribute, store the track of the hazardous material throughout its material life cycle. Definition. These points of the part of the established supply of the operational normally will refer to the hazardous material command control program. Hazardous material control centers. Other locally determined name of the hazardous material control program ensures the continuous visibility of hazardous material on the installation, responsible to the customer needs. Core functions of the hazardous material control program include procurement, storage, issue, reissue of the hazardous material. Local levels of service and may include the hazardous material delivery and pickup depending on the mission, geographic organization, and resources. Hazardous material delivery pickup and involves the control and shop level efficiencies, offers opportunities to link the hazardous material and hazardous waste operations. Risk assessment and cost analysis for the support beyond core functions should be conducted to avoid mission creep. These services will be mission funded. Discussion. It must be the case that hazardous material control program is integrated with the existing supply operations. The resource safety data sheets, procurement receives, stores, issues, and reissues hazardous material, conducts the data, the entry of the hazardous material management program tracking system, tracks and hazardous material waste, the hazardous material management material through the cycle of the installation. To the extent of the possibility, hazardous material storage is limited to the critical long lead time. The reuse of the just-in-time procurement for the issues of the majority of the hazardous material in the Army, the National Guard, centralized hazardous material control program are established by the Joint Force Headquarters and State Area Command is U.S. property, and official offices of hazard management program regional Army National Guard garrison or Hmmp garrisons. The hazard material control program is established and controlled by the Department of Logistics. Oversees the hazard control program are operated by Theater Logistics Command of the local logistic activities. Hazard material control program operate normally required a supervisor, supply specialist, warehouse personnel, supervisor, supply specialist conduct normal supply operations, research, safety data sheets, submit on to the safety data sheet repository, record a hazard material tracking information, support environmental aspects, to conduct the hazard material management program, software, data entry, warehouse personnel conduct, normal warehouse operations. Personal strength are consistent with the organization. Manning documents vary based on the base of number of the hazardous material transactions conducted per day geographically in facilities. Tracking methodology system. Major environmental aspects to supply the operation include the required hazard transaction chemical constitution level, identifying the hazard material tracking and tracking movement of at the product chemical constitution level, established in the reuse and the reissue capability, record materials use and disposition. A single database should be used in every situation. Installations may establish each single hazard material control program, supplementing to the center hazard material control program with the satellite of the hazard material control program as required by. But all inventories transactions are made in a single database. The facility's installation wide Visibility as the assets for the cross-leveling, tracking, and reporting individual activities, organization, production lines, obtaining the hazard material management, hazard material control program, and when the possible just-in-time, the requisition local purchase are used in the hazard material control program to reduce the amount of the hazard material stored on the garrison or potential expired shelf life at disposal. Installation should establish control of the purchase of the hazard material government purchase cards. To ensure the hazard material entering the installation is required with the track of the hazard material control program. Preferably, installation should be pre-included. The use of general GPCs or general government purchase cards for hazard material procurement by all but the hazard material control program. The tracking of the hazard material throughout its life cycle of the installation description, tracking the hazard material point of the procurement of the final disposition is conducted to unlimited the hazard material brought onto the garrison to be watched as approved. B, maintain a near real lifetime hazard material chemical inventory from the time of the point and entry of the point of the departure. Control hazard material issued to the approved activity trained individuals. Manage the hazard material shelf life. Comply with the regulatory requirements. Provide potential exposure information. Identify the training equipment requirements. Identify the pollution prevention opportunities. Collect the life cycle, the cost information for the program managers. Provide collective information for the fire emergency response plan. Hazard material approval ordering issues tracking by the units of use, and each hazard material is approved for the use of the specific process. Hazard low levels hazard management stockage establish and track the facility's more efficient uses to less risk of the personnel usable pollution prevention opportunity assessment information. What to track? Okay, what to track? All installations should track the hazard material at the chemical constitution level using the manufacturer's safety data sheets as source of the chemical constitution information. Electronic safety data sheets are usually available on the Internet of the Defense Hazard Material Information Resource System, or HMIRS. www.dlis.dla.mil.hmirs will use the identification on the university-sized compact disc directly for the manufacturer to distributor. As fielding of the single Army logistic enterprise occurs, then information pertaining to the safety data sheets will be available through the operation platform. These sources provide the sufficient hazard material, chemical constitution, physical property handling information. The installation committee, the responsible determination for the hazard material control, or the hazard material to track. The tracking all products requiring of the safety data sheet through their life cycle on the installation is recommended, and minimum institutions should track those products containing the chemicals necessary to comply with the environmental reporting permitting the requirements. Environmental offices should review the material requiring the safety data sheets, the list of the chemicals to determine which materials are most likely could possibly reach a reporting of the threshold. Tracking these items. All installations should be tracked by the EPA prior Environmental Protection Agency prior to the chemical and their associated processes. Other minimum tracking criteria may be categorized following. Minimum tracking points data for the hazard material is approved. The requisition determination of the material authorized the user list, and if trained or use the material as, and if less, then can be substituted. The receipt determine the items received, the documentation number, stock number, nomenclature, part number, the quantity, manufacturer, vendor, the material safety data sheet number, the chemical constitution quantity, expiration date, who and or when to receive, when stored, and when receiving location is authorized to receive or store the item stored is the determined location where items are to be stored. Issues reissued. Determine the quantity reissued of the material, chemical constitution, material classification process, issued to whom issued, if the person is trained, if the person has mandatory equipment or is located and the location is issued. Return the storage. Determine the quantity return of the product, the constitution, from who, and storage process, location, material classifications. F. Transfer between the activities. Determine what and how must be transferred. Product and the constitution. What is the day, the time of the transfer? What are losing and gaining process? What are the loss and gaining locations? Transfer off-site. Determine the weight, what and how much transferred product constitution. What are the losing processes, location when it is gained, and addressing losing and the gaining the point of the context, what are date of the time of the transfer. Actual usage. Determine how much of the product of the chemical constitution were actually used, the volume, the quantity issued, of the quality calculated by the process, inclusive of the date and time of the reported usage. Recycling. What and how much used how much was recycled product in the constitution with the recycling process, how much returned to the storage where returned it, and where the process returned it either similar to receipt. Resealing of the process distribution should also include the related waste streams. Disposal information is minimum, and this includes the turn-in date, the material description, quantity, and disposal information may also include all foreign information met in the resource Resource Conservation Recovery Act with the requirements of SHPO in the Defense of Reutilization Marketing Offices, such as a container identification type with the size, quantity, chemical constitution, percentages, contracting line number, individual totals, costs, and generator final disposal location, start date, container close data, container pickup data, transfer dates, and disposal certification date. F. Reduce the hazard material inventory at the user and operator level. 1. Description. Establish the realistic operational level of the hazard material at the user or the operator level. Reduction of the hazard material inventories. Improve the readiness. Reducing capital investment costs in procurement, storage, and handling. Reducing the potential hazards to personnel. Reducing shelf life, expiration, disposal. This also requires responsive hazard material controllers program that expedite procurements to meet the mission needs. The hazard material reduction should be accomplished during the user or operator level, reviewing the stockage to ensure the only sufficient material the immediate usage of the single job the protocol is on hand. Typical with those translate within 7 to 14 days supply of the hazard material at the job site. Thus, hazard material should be substituted whenever possible. This applies to all Army installations and activities. 2. Discussion. Activities within the shop of the bench stock inventories will review the stockage levels and determine whether the item can be reduced or replaced with the less of the hazardous material. Excess of the items should be returned to the hazardous material control panel or control program. The redistribution used prior to the expiration date. Review the hazardous material usage to the order of the products by the units of the use of the extent possible for the exposed. Example of the most common use of the oil by the quart of the order of the oil of the quart rather than by a 55-gallon drum. Rely on the hazard material control program for the rapid replenishment. Hazardous materials should be returned and improved at the storage locker when not in use. Given the hazard material control program authority responsibility to conduct the general GPC, the general as GPC other than local purchase instead of the individual shops. Activity supervisors should periodically review TM's prescribed maintenance procedures. Recommended opportunities to reduce hazard material, reduce the hazards and waste generation, and to the weapon system managers. Troop installation should review operational loads, authorized stock usage, unit basic loads, determine hazard material stockage levels can be reduced without adverse impacts of the readiness. Review the hazard material waste usage to order product. The use of the extent possible maintenance activities should eliminate the practice for the buying of for the multiple vendors, reducing handling management. While at garrison, all activities are directed to the obtaining the hazard material through the hazard material control programs. The hazard material control programs are directed to provide required material with specified periods of time, just in time procurement. This reduces the hazard material storage requirements within the units in the hazard material control program. Publishing policies procured in the use of the GP government purchasing cards for the hazard material waste program and all but hazard material program policies. Installation. Activities using the dedicated supply delivery system. You can reduce the hazard material stockage at the user and the operator level and delivering the hazard material as needed. Automated manual electronic telephone procedures can be established and established time sortedly supporting supply activities into the hazard material control program. It is essential for their business to practice successful established recycling capabilities where practical to reduce procurement costs and inventory levels. Sample candidates for the recycling are antifreeze, part cleaning solvent, and motor oil. Manage the tracking of the shelf life of the material is intended for purpose before expiration in accordance with the Department of Defense 414027M. Description of the management of the material safety should support the reduction of acquisition waste of the process and cost of all Army installation record of the use of the product shelf information to ensure the use of the return of the products prior to the expiration date. Local procedures will include the shelf management practices to be followed installed, all hazardous material is received. Shelf life is verified, and record of the material is stored and issued using the old date. It's first inventory listing of the reviewed periodically to identify the material nearing the expiration dates. Material is examined for the shelf life extension, returned in accordance with the Army supply policy. Method of tracking, managing the may vary. Activities using the tracking system barcode capability, including shelf information of the barcode data, are used to prepare the management queries, identifying the hazard management where near shelf life expiration dates. Procedures, examination, hazard waste management at time of the receipt. Material expiration within 60 days should be challenged for the purpose of returning to the source of the supply. Container barcodes are noted with the expiration date as the material is stored with the expiration date. Activities with a small stockage level, for example, fewer than 15 cans of an item on the hand at one time, should store in containers by the shelf life. Older containers in the front and used in the first out of the business practices. Establish periodically hazard material management compliance with the self-assessment audit to identify compliance procedures and improvements. Description of the installation incorporate the hazard material consideration into existing audit systems to determine the status. Hazard material procedure regulatory compliance assessment could be formal, informal. For example, a maintenance assistant visit can include the identifying of the hazard material in workspace that is not constant with specified procedures that are in the hazard material management program authorized user list. Procedure installation should establish a specific period of reviews of the hazard material management program to include the assistant visits of the activities of tenant self of audits can be achieved through formal, informal inspection by environmental safety offices and or by supervisors. Assistant set teams can be established by the shop bench inventors should be reviewed to ensure stockage levels not extensive to determine which items to reduce replaced by the less hazardous materials. Items cannot be used in the minimum period, for example, for 2 weeks for this use. A specific held for the production period should be returned to the hazard material control program for the redistribution and use prior to the expiration date. These visits should also include an audit on hand stock and to verify the material which was issued by the hazard material control program to ensure stock shops are properly reporting usage to verify the appropriate material safety data sheets are on hand. Installation could also incorporate these checks in existing visits of the environmental safety staff as well as the supervisor manager stocks containing the basic load, operational load, prescribed load list. All stock listed should be reviewed, updating during these visits. These checks will also be included in an audit on hand stock to verify that the material is being issued via the hazard material control program. Ensure the units are properly reporting the usage to verify their appropriate material safety data sheets are on hand. Ensure the personnel are trained in the safe handling of the hazard material related safety hazards containing communication subjects. Description: supervisors should ensure all personnel handling of being exposed to the hazardous material receive and are current required training. Personnel required to wear personal protective equipment should be trained in the use of the protective personal equipment and being issued the personal protective equipment and ensuring personal protective equipment serviceability. Produce procedures supporting safety, environmental or industrial hygiene. Offices should review operations to determine whether the training is required of the safety information documentation reported to the supervisor. Employees that are notified of required of the training responsible training office should be conducting training. Commander, supervisor, manager is responsible for the ensuring personnel successful completing training. Establishing and tracking the Hmmp metrics. The Army records review the analysis of the hazard material operational data sources and information measure the hazard material effectiveness, prepare performance measures, metrics measures verified, reproducible linkage linked to the hazard material management program management and business practices. Initially, Headquarters Department of the Army wished to track the implementation of the hazard material management program at the installation. As a single Army logistic enterprise reaches a full fielding, more detailed metrics may be established, tracked without placing additional report burdens on the installation. The following metrics are initially established: percentage of installation have the implemented then, and it has a material management program that includes the appropriate organization and activities of the installation. Percentage reduction of the hazard material acquisition costs associated with the reduction of hazard material usages, the reduction procurement hazard waste processing costs. Army garrison hazard waste streams have historically included a significant percentage of hazard material within the exposed shelf life. The DA goals reduce hazardous material acquisition costs by 5% annual. Based on the baseline of the year of 2005, the Army-wide matrix depot and troop garrisons normally have a greater cost reduction opportunity. Smaller facilities, however, all Army installations strive toward meeting the hazardous material acquisition, hazardous waste processing, and cost reduction goal. Army commands directing report units installation may establish supplemental metrics to aid the tracking progress of the Army and the command goals. Appendix 1, these are the references.